the United States doesn't send bombers to Iran because anybody else commands it to, but it's very clear that Bibi Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, pushed and pushed Donald Trump to do this. We have an account by Maggie Haberman in the Times about meetings in the Situation Room in which, I think quite unusual, a foreign head of state urged the President of the United States to go to war with it against a third party, against Iran. It's my understanding that when you were Secretary of State, Bibi Netanyahu made the same case. Tell me about that.
Well, you're absolutely right. When I was secretary, it was a constant, theme by Netanyahu and his then government, the then defense minister, Ehud Barak, the former prime minister. It was relentless. It was a constant push. I remember...
what would he say to you?
What?
What would he say to you?
He would basically say, you need to support us in attacking Iran. And back then, this was, 2009 to the end of 2012, we had more capacity than Israel did on several fronts to do that. And so there was a constant argument that we would have. And I remember one day I was on the phone for hours with Ehud, with Bibi, with others, and they would say things like, our planes are on the tarmac. And I'd say, well, good luck. I mean, great. Why are you doing this?
Where else would planes be other than in the air?
But on the tarmac, ready to take
I see.
off. Yes. Well, no, they'd be in the hangar, but they were on the tarmac. And you would say things.
You're saying you were being played
all the time, all the time. I mean,
by an ally that receives an enormous amount of aid.
Well, of course. And look, Bibi's been obsessed as long as I've dealt with him with two things: Iran, as you know, and his desire to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia. The first formal meeting I had with him in 2009, probably March, at the State Department, it was absolutely, how can we get normalization with Saudi Arabia, and how do we totally decapitate Iran? And he had this view that I think has become very clear in his, dealings with Trump. Number one, decapitate the regime, it will fall. Number two, do enough bombing against enough critical infrastructure, try to, disable the military insofar as possible, the people will rise up. And that was just never our read about what was going to happen, in part because this is a ruthless, theocratic regime that, at least at the top levels, the clerical level, has a kind of apocalyptic view of their own importance in the struggle against Israel, the United States, the West, their Sunni neighbors, the whole map that they look at. And they are also a regime that learned, sadly, a lesson from the overthrow of the Shah. There's a lot of, analysis about why the Shah was finally deposed, but one of the arguments is, at the end, he would not murder his people. He would not order the mass murder of the demonstrators in the street. This regime has no such compunction. So if you have a regime that has already proven, as it did last year, they were willing to kill 40,000 Iranians over the protests that were going on. If you have this alliance between the clerics and the military, they have enough folks in their ranks to keep moving up and taking over. Our take on Iran was, absent an effective armed opposition, which we've never seen, and absent some kind of internal dissent, whether like a general who would say, I'm not going to tolerate, this any longer.
And not the Shah's son sitting in Virginia or Paris.
I give him credit for being a voice for the aspirations of some of the Iranian people. I do give him credit. He's tried to fill a role that you cannot fill from sitting in Virginia or wherever, but he at least tried to voice the legitimate discontent of the Iranian people. But this regime is not, they're not going to be toppled by, appeals to their humanity, to their, the angels of their, better nature. No, I mean, they are there to stay in power and to promote a, very clear political religious agenda.
So if I hear what you're saying correctly, is number one, Bibi Netanyahu bamboozled Donald Trump, and number two, I don't imagine the intelligence changed radically about the state of play in Iran, that the president ignored not only the advice of his vice president and secretary of state, but the intelligence community telling him on the ground this would be a terrible idea.
Well, I can't speak to that. I don't know what was presented to him. I also think coming off the attacks of last June, which I supported the very specific surgical attacks on the known nuclear weapons sites. Mm-hmm. I believed that that was a clear mission with very achievable goals. I didn't know whether you could eliminate the program, but I thought you could certainly set it back. So I think coming off that, which was, from their perspective, successful.
Wouldn't it have been better to stick with the JCPOA and renegotiate an extension?
Well, 1,000%, David. And if suppose Trump had said the following, because when you are negotiating, your strongest threatening military action, not actually taking it. And suppose, Trump, back in his first term, had said, I'm not satisfied with this agreement. There were, it wasn't perfect, and, I'm sure there are people in this audience that didn't support it, but it was the best deal we could get to put a lid on the nuclear program. It didn't deal with the ballistic missiles. It didn't deal with the proxies. So if Trump had said, there are things about it I don't like, and I am going to walk away from it unless we open up negotiations. And I believe that we need to open up negotiations because otherwise, I might be forced to take action. That then gives you the pressure and the room to try to do something. That's not what he did. He said, Barack Obama did it, I'm out, we're withdrawing.